Thank you, Conrad. I'm indeed happy to call you and your colleagues dear friends, and to give you every support in the holy and important work that you do promoting Israel and Israel-Nordic relations. I thought that I would talk to you today about the Middle East during the Corona crisis and post-Corona. And I'll start with a broader question, which is, after coming through the Corona crisis, are we going to be more united as humanity, having discovered through this crisis our collective global vulnerability? Is this going to mean more cooperation, international cooperation in health and environmental matters, and perhaps fewer wars as well? Or will the nations of the world, and the Middle East in particular, become more divided and insular and raise the border walls higher than ever? After all, in this crisis, it's pretty clear that the United Nations and the European Union have proved to be essentially useless, and every country has been more or less left to fend for itself. And we already see the global arms race renewing itself, just as there has been a global race for face masks and ventilators during the coronavirus crisis, without any real trace of common destiny. And to take two specific examples from this region, from the Middle East, even as the Islamic Republic of Iran has been hard hit by the coronavirus, much harder hit than they're letting on or admitting to, they've shown no softening. The Iranians have shown no softening whatsoever towards Israel or the West. Just the opposite is true. Iran has blamed Jews, Zionists in America for the pandemic. It's sworn not to take any cure for the virus produced in Israel, and it's ramped up its its outlawed enrichment of uranium for nuclear weaponry. And take a second example, the Palestinian Authority. It's taken medical aid and humanitarian assistance from Israel, while at the same time falsely accusing Israeli soldiers of purposefully spreading the virus in the PA. This accusation is straight from the mouth of Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh. And of course, it was echoed by the tyrant of Ankara, President Erdogan of Turkey. So is this region going to become more united as humanity and more aware of its collective vulnerability? I'm not so sure. There are some experts who have suggested that the virus will have a moderating effect on the conflicts in this region. It's true that in the meantime, conflicts in this region and also in the world have been pushed to the back pages of the newspapers, but to say that the core elements that are destabilizing the region are just waiting for the virus crisis to be resolved and then peace will break out, well, that's wishful thinking at best. For Israel, this means that while fighting the coronavirus, Israel also has to remain alert, very alert as to what's happening in the region. Without going into further detail, I assume that you know that Israel has had a tough time with the virus, as most countries in the world. Israel acted early to close off international travel. Prime Minister Netanyahu has led the country in fighting back the virus very aggressively. In relative global terms, Israel has a small number of fatalities. About 140 people have died from the virus thus far, and some 12,000 people have been infected. But it's not the numbers we're seeing, God forbid, in Italy, Spain, or the United States. If you look at Syria, the Russians and the Syrians have kept their battles up for the M4 motorway between Latakia and Aleppo and the 600 square kilometers in the north part of the country that they're trying to take away, both from Islamic militants and the Turks. In Iraq, Shiite militias backed by Iran have increased their attacks on the American military in the country. In Yemen, the Iranian-backed Houthis have upped their campaign. The war continues to rage there. The Houthis are expanding their control over the northern part of the state. And even the Chinese have been pursuing their close relationship with the Iranians, despite the fact that clearly the virus spread from China to Iran. And even though there is growing public outrage in Iran about the way the virus has been dealt with, the Iranians don't seem deterred from pursuing their hegemonic ambitions in the region. Everybody asks the question, will the way in which Iran has been hard hit by the virus, both economically and health-wise, going to affect regime change or a shift in Iran's nuclear ambitions? Unfortunately, there is no evidence that that is the case. This is a real crisis because for the first time, there is a clear link that's been made clear to the Iranian public between the harsh economic realities they're in, no adequate infrastructure in the country, existential threats to the average citizen, and nevertheless, the Iranians have known how to clamp down on all forms of public protests in each of the periods that there were spikes in public protests in Iran. And as I said, they're still stepping up their attacks against American targets in Iraq. And therefore, while the Iranians are hard pressed by the current situation, I don't see them suing for renewed negotiations with America, certainly not until they draw a greater amount of blood from the Americans. The Iranians have always wanted to enter negotiations from a position of strength and a position of power, and that would probably come after they drag America and the Middle East into more violent conflict, and only then might the Iranians be willing to enter new talks with America, but I think that's far, far off. I'll conclude with a couple words about the situation in the immediate environment surrounding Israel, specifically in the Palestinian-controlled areas in Judea and Samaria on the one hand, and Gaza on the other. There has not been a widespread outbreak of the virus in these areas, at least not yet, although there are many who feel that that is yet coming because there are weak civil society controls. The Palestinian Authority, on the one hand, and Hamas, on the other hand, have taken this very seriously. And as I said, cynically so, attacking Israel while taking Israeli assistance, training, and aid at the same time. But we are going to get back to dealing with the diplomatic issues because a new Israeli government is about to be formed. I am hopeful that it will yet be a broad government involving both Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party and what's left of the blue and white party headed by General Gantz. And one of the first issues on the agenda of that government is clearly going to be implementation of the Trump Mideast peace plan, and specifically a declaration of partial Israeli sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. I think that would be a near consensus step in Israel, and it would be recognized by the US, at least as long as Trump is American president, despite the fact that the international community, by and large, still insists on maximal Palestinian demands for what they call the everybody knows paradigm, meaning the 1967 lines. But Israel is not going to wait patiently and endlessly for a negotiation with Palestinians that the Palestinians themselves don't really want and that which they have repeatedly rejected. Should Israel wait for miraculous transformations, democratic transformations on the Palestinian side, or wait for more international pressures on Israel to unilaterally withdraw, lock, stock, and barrel from the West Bank? I don't think so. And I know that Prime Minister Netanyahu will be seeking to move swiftly once a new government is formed to reach agreement with the US on steps to apply Israeli sovereignty in the territories in at least 30% of Judea and Samaria, where most Israelis live. Of course, the Trump paradigm falls far short of the uttermost and maximal Palestinian demands, and it requires some modification of Israeli positions as well, but it is a serious effort, a detailed effort to answer basic needs on both sides, Israeli security and rights on the one hand, Palestinian prosperity and sovereignty on the other hand, without reverting to massive human dislocations or risking radical Islamist victory. And therefore, I believe that Israel will try to move forward on that plan this summer, and it will leave Abbas and his Fatah party, as well as Hamas, behind. It will explicitly beckon Palestinians to project new leadership, ready for compromise and true reconciliation. And it will hold out the promise of a bright and economic future with them. I'm not sure that the Palestinians have the leadership today to capitalize on that. That's where I see us going over the coming months. I hope that was useful for you. I'll be glad to entertain any additional issues you want to raise with me or any questions you seek to pose. Please.